As the crowds of modern Beijing fade behind us, we arrive at one of China's most beautiful imperial retreats, the magnificent Summer Palace. Spread across hills, gardens, temples and the vast waters of Kunming Lake, this UNESCO World Heritage Site was once the private escape of emperors and empresses seeking peace away from the intensity of the Forbidden City. Today, we'll walk through its lakeside paths, elegant corridors and imperial gardens, uncovering the stories hidden within this extraordinary landscape. Welcome to the Summer Palace. Our journey begins near the eastern entrance, where the noise of the modern capital suddenly gives way to willow trees, stone bridges, and the quiet sound of water moving against the shore. Although many visitors think of this as simply a royal garden, the Summer Palace was actually designed as a complete imperial world, a place where rulers could govern, relax, celebrate, and retreat from the pressures of court life. The origins of the palace stretch back to the 12th century, but much of what we see today was shaped during the Qing Dynasty, particularly under the powerful reign of Emperor Qianlong in the 18th century. Qianlong ordered the expansion of these grounds into a masterpiece of landscape design inspired by the famous gardens of southern China. The result was not a single palace building, but an enormous living painting combining architecture with nature. And everywhere you look, there is symbolism. In Chinese imperial design, nothing is accidental. The placement of trees, bridges, gates, and even rocks was carefully planned to create harmony between humanity and nature, a reflection of ancient Chinese philosophy. As we continue walking deeper into the grounds, Kunming Lake opens before us. The lake dominates the entire landscape, covering around 3/4 of the Summer Palace complex. Although it appears entirely natural, much of it was actually enlarged by human labour. Tens of thousands of workers excavated the lake, and the earth they removed helped create Longevity Hill rising beside it. The scale is staggering. Standing here today, it's difficult to imagine this place as anything other than timeless serenity. But behind the calm beauty lies a turbulent history involving war, rebellion, imperial extravagance, and foreign invasion. The Summer Palace suffered terrible destruction in 1860 during the Second Opium War, when British and French forces marched into Beijing. Much of the imperial garden complex was looted and burned. Priceless treasures disappeared forever, and entire sections of the palace were reduced to ruins. But the palace would rise again. One figure is forever linked with its reconstruction: the formidable Empress Dowager Cixi. Cixi remains one of the most controversial figures in Chinese history. To some, she was a skilled political survivor who held the empire together during a period of immense instability. To others, she symbolized corruption and imperial decline. What is certain is that she loved the Summer Palace deeply. In the late 19th century, she ordered its restoration using funds that critics claimed should have modernized the Qing navy. Whether fully true or partly exaggerated by political enemies, the story became legendary. The image of an empress rebuilding gardens while foreign powers closed in on China helped shape her reputation for generations. As we walk along the lakeside, it's easy to understand why she chose this place as her sanctuary. The atmosphere feels almost theatrical. Traditional Chinese pavilions appear one moment through the trees, then vanish again behind bends in the pathway. Boats drift slowly across the water. Stone lanterns stand silently beside the shore. Every view seems carefully framed like a painting. Ahead of us stretches one of the Summer Palace's most famous features, the long corridor. At over 700 meters in length, this covered walkway is said to be the longest decorated corridor in the world. Built beside the lake, It allowed members of the imperial court to walk comfortably through the gardens protected from sun, rain and snow. But the real magic lies above us. The beams and ceilings are covered with thousands upon thousands of painted scenes. Landscapes, legends, flowers, birds, historical battles and characters from Chinese literature decorate nearly every surface. No two paintings are exactly alike. Walking through the corridor feels almost hypnotic. It's less like moving through a building and more like passing through a giant illustrated storybook. And this was not merely decoration. Art in Imperial China often carried moral lessons. The scenes painted here reflected ideals of loyalty, wisdom, courage, and harmony. Members of the royal family walking these corridors were surrounded constantly by reminders of philosophy, history, and cultural identity. As we continue beside the water, the views across Kunming Lake become more spectacular. In the distance, elegant bridges arc across the surface, inspired by the famous scenery of Hangzhou's West Lake hundreds of miles away. Emperor Qianlong admired the landscapes of southern China so much that he recreated elements of them here in Beijing. For the emperors, the summer palace was not simply a residence, it was a miniature version of the empire itself. And while today tourists stroll these pathways with cameras and umbrellas, this was once one of the most restricted places in China. Ordinary citizens would never have seen these gardens. Access was limited entirely to the imperial family, court officials, servants, guards, and selected guests. Imagine the contrast. Beyond these walls lay the crowded streets of imperial Beijing, filled with merchants, laborers, and soldiers. Yet inside the summer palace existed a carefully controlled world of tranquility and privilege. As we move further along the shore, the reflections of the buildings shimmer across the lake surface. Even now, despite the huge number of visitors each year, there are moments when the palace suddenly becomes quiet. A breeze moves through the willow branches. The water ripples softly against the stone embankments. Somewhere in the distance comes the sound of traditional music played from a tourist boat. And for a brief second, it becomes easier to imagine the Qing court still here. Officials in silk robes once hurried through these gardens carrying imperial messages. Eunuchs served tea beneath shaded pavilions. Members of the royal family travelled across the lake in ornate dragon boats during festivals and celebrations. The summer palace was a stage upon which imperial power presented itself with elegance and sophistication. Yet the final decades of the Qing Dynasty were filled with crisis. Foreign powers pressured China militarily and economically. Internal rebellions weakened the empire. Reformers demanded modernization while conservatives resisted change. The old imperial system that had ruled China for centuries was beginning to crack, and through all of it, the summer palace remained a symbol of imperial authority, beautiful, refined, and increasingly disconnected from the rapidly changing world beyond its walls. Following the fall of the Qing Dynasty in 1912, the palace entered an entirely new chapter. The age of emperors had ended. China itself would soon face warlord conflicts, invasion, civil war, revolution, and dramatic transformation. But somehow, the summer palace survived it all. Today, it stands not as a royal retreat, but as a public treasure, one of the greatest surviving examples of Chinese landscape architecture anywhere on Earth. As our walk continues, it's impossible not to notice how carefully nature and architecture blend together here. Western palaces often dominate their landscapes, imposing order upon them, but traditional Chinese garden design aims for balance instead. Buildings frame nature rather than overpower it. The result feels remarkably modern despite being centuries old. Around every corner is another carefully composed scene. Curved rooftops reflected in water, ancient trees leaning above stone paths, distant hills perfectly aligned behind temple gates. Even the changing seasons transform the palace completely. In spring, blossom trees fill the gardens with colour. Summer brings lotus flowers across the lake. Autumn paints the hills gold and crimson. Winter covers the rooftops with snow, creating scenes that resemble classical Chinese paintings. And perhaps that is the greatest achievement of the Summer Palace. It was designed not simply to impress, but to create emotion, calmness, reflection, harmony, and escape. As we begin reaching the quieter end of our walk, away from the busiest sections of the palace, the atmosphere becomes more peaceful still. The crowds thin out, and the sounds of the city seem impossibly far away. It's remarkable to think that all of this exists within modern Beijing, one of the largest and busiest cities on Earth. The Summer Palace endures as a surviving fragment of Imperial China, offering a glimpse into a vanished world of emperors, court politics, philosophy, artistry, and extraordinary ambition. And unlike many historic sites that feel frozen in time, this place still feels alive. Locals gather here to walk beside the lake. Families relax beneath the trees. Elderly musicians play traditional instruments in shaded corners. The palace continues serving the purpose it was always meant for, providing peace and retreat from the outside world. As the final views of Kunming Lake drift past us, the Summer Palace leaves behind not just images of beauty, but questions about power, history, and the rise and fall of empires. Dynasties disappeared, revolutions came and went, entire political systems collapsed, yet the gardens remain. Thank you for joining me on this walk through the Summer Palace in Beijing. If you enjoyed exploring this extraordinary piece of Chinese history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again for more journeys through the world's most fascinating historic places.